everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be making a video response to Lena over at Just Kiss My Frog. She made a video called Why I Don't Use Goodreads, and I just thought it was a really interesting video. I highly recommend go watching that one first. First, I just want to say off the bat, I'm not in any way discrediting anything that she says or am trying to argue with her about her reasons why she doesn't use Goodreads. I thought her video was really interesting, and I definitely know that there's plenty of people who don't use Goodreads and don't enjoy it. And I thought that her reasoning and her conclusions from her reasoning were really interesting because a lot of the times she was making certain arguments for a specific purpose, and it's funny because I can make basically the opposite argument for the same purpose, which is just like a personal preference thing, but I just found that we were basically saying the same thing or coming to the same conclusion in two very different paths. First, I joined Goodreads a really long time ago. I'm a bit of a Goodreads hipster because I joined back in 2007. I think like my freshman year of college or so. I found this link that was basically to Art Garfunkel's website, and on his website he lists every book that he has ever read since the 1960s. Like, he still updates that list to this day. I will leave a link to that if you guys are interested in the way that I was, but I just thought that this was so cool that he had a record of every book he has ever read, and so I knew that I wanted to do something similar. I started off using just like regular old pen and paper and a notebook, keeping track of the books that I read, but I realized quickly that the things that I wanted to keep track of was not fitting on the pages. So I joined a bunch of different services throughout the years. There was one called Readers Squared or something like that. I was a part of a library thing for a while, and then eventually I just stuck with Goodreads because that is the one that had the most appealing design and elements to offer. So when I joined Goodreads, it wasn't at all for the social aspect of it. I literally just wanted a place to put the books that I read and keep a record of what I've read and when I've read it, and a very basic synopsis of what I thought about those books. One of the things Lena mentions in her video is the idea of her being at this age of 24 and trying to go back in time and try to remember every book that she's ever read ever, and I definitely agree with her on that. If I was at this age and I was joining Goodreads and I tried to remember all of my previous books, I would probably be super overwhelmed. Goodreads isn't necessarily a collection of every book that I've ever read in my life, but it pretty much is every book that I've ever read since like 2007, which at this point is a pretty decent amount of books. And another thing that Lena mentioned was the idea of rating books and having a list of the books that she is currently reading, which is probably like a good 20 books, and also the fact that she doesn't finish every book that she reads. All of that just leads to her Goodreads life being too complicated, which I think is really interesting because I never thought about those things as being complicated. Like, to me, I don't rate books so that way other people can look at them and understand why I like a book. My rating system is literally just for me. I developed it before I knew what book reviewing and book blogging and book vlogging was, so my rating system perfectly makes sense in my head. So if I go back to a review I wrote in 2008, I completely know what that 3-star, 4-star, 5-star means, especially because a lot of times I might not necessarily remember off the bat what I felt about a book, but for some reason seeing that rating and with the book cover, it sort of sparks something in my mind that brings up that memory of what I felt about the book. So even though I might not know it off the bat, looking at the rating with the book for me reminds me of what I felt about the book. There have been a couple of times since joining YouTube, and then quite a few times in the past, where I mark a book as do not finish. I have a shelf on there marked DNF. I have no problem putting a book on there because I definitely am of the opinion that if you're not enjoying a book after, you know, a good 100 or so pages, then don't finish it. There's too many good books in the world to force yourself to have an unenjoyable experience with them. Another thing that Lena brings up is this idea of she doesn't necessarily want to know all the time about what other people have read, and she doesn't necessarily always want other people to know what she has read. The example that she gives is she likes the idea of just sort of calling up a friend and being like, hey, have you read Howard's End? Oh, you have. And then they have a conversation about the topic. I think that is sort of just a personal preference thing where I don't have a lot of friends that I can call up like that. I have a handful that read, but they don't read to the extent that I do, and now the majority of the people people that I am friends with on Goodreads are people from the internet who I can't necessarily just call up and see what they thought of a book. And I think that it's interesting that when one of my friends or someone that I know in real life or I'm friends with on Facebook joins Goodreads and I get that little notification, I get really excited because I might not have known that they were a reader before. Or the other thing is that I'll sometimes look up books and see who has rated them or who has marked them as read on Goodreads, and then I will go out of my way to contact them and have that conversation. I feel like Goodreads shouldn't be, an endpoint necessarily when it comes to having a discussion about books. That's why, we don't all just sit on Goodreads. We go on YouTube, we talk to each other on Twitter and Tumblr and have all of these multifaceted conversations that I think Goodreads is just one component in that. I think that a lot of this just kind of boils down to how Lena and I sort of view Goodreads in very different ways, but I think they're both really interesting ways, and I think they're both completely valid. I definitely would never shame anyone into joining Goodreads or make them feel bad for not being on Goodreads. It's definitely, your own prerogative. You join the social networks that you choose to join or the websites that you choose to join, and you share what you want to share. That's totally up to you. But for me, in the end, Goodreads is really just about me and my bad memory. I want that record of what I read because there have been quite a few times where I've forgotten that I've read a book and then I look it up on Goodreads and I realize that I read it. I also like the idea of, even if Goodreads isn't around, I can still download it as an Excel sheet and sort of having this record and maybe, 40 and 50 years down the line looking back on the things that I read when I was at this age and reminiscing about how I felt about those books. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on why I use Goodreads. Leave your comments down below letting me know if you guys use Goodreads. If you guys do, why do you guys use Goodreads? I think it's very interesting because there's so many different aspects to Goodreads now that there's so many different reasons that you can join Goodreads. A lot of people just join for the social media aspect of it, which I think is really interesting because that's a component that I always completely forget about. Like, I like the fact that I can sort of communicate with people on Goodreads, but I never actually utilize that feature. Other people join Goodreads to be able to follow people that they like so that way they can find book recommendations that way. Or if you're not on Goodreads at all, let me know down below why you're not on Goodreads. I know a lot of people join some other services because they like those features better, or they like the UI better, or because of the whole Amazon thing, a lot of people left Goodreads. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.